Hello, friends. Today we're going to be talking about Saturn's retrograde. Saturn started its retrograde motion on July 26 at 14 degrees of Aries, and it's going to retrace its steps back to 7 degrees of Aries before it stations to restart its direct motion on December 10th. So now we're under the rule of a retrograde planet. And whenever a planet is retrograding, that means in its orbit, it's very close to Earth. So in a lot of ways, its significations become magnified, amplified, it gets strengthened. And I remember when I was taking my classes with Vic Decara and learning astrology, one of the analogies that he gave me was that imagine a retrograde planet is like you have a sore spot on your body and someone's now keep squeezing that sore spot. So it has an amplified effect. Saturn's going back to bring into our viewpoint some of the difficulties we have already experienced in the past year. It's going to make us confront some responsibilities that we thought it was over and done with. It's now behind us. Some of the old frustrations are coming back. And going through one set of hardship once in life is bad enough. To go over it again, a lot of times it just feels like too much. It can feel like we're suffering now. But this is Saturn's divine duty. Hardship, suffering, pain. That's the way it makes us more conscious about certain things. Like Saturn has this remarkable way of bringing us face to face with those aspects of life that feel too heavy and burdensome. And the way that he brings us into contact with different facets of life that are unpleasant, it tests our degree of patience and forbearance, those parts that require relentless endurance. So in a lot of ways, Saturn can make us feel tired and exhausted. So with all of that in mind, when I was thinking about this video, the question that was keep coming into my mind was this concept of suffering. And if this is Saturn's divine duty, there has to be a purpose to this in existence, which made me question, what is suffering for? And if you sit there and meditate on this, you'll see that there are different types of suffering. I mean, they're all experienced as something unpleasant, but the different kinds of burdens that we carry in life don't have the same meaning. Because some forms of suffering slow down life to a point of suffocation. It's closing the possibilities of life. But there are these other kinds of suffering that's actually trying to open life up. Some suffering leave us feeling like we're trapped in a circumstance. But other kinds of suffering is actually proving to us what truly matters in this life. What is worth loving, living for, dying for. And I think Saturn's retrograde right now is about this. Is about understanding this difference. And Saturn is a very logical planet. It's a critical thinking planet. It wants us to be able to differentiate this. I would say that Saturn's going through this retrograde. It's allowing us to revisit some of the difficulties of our life as an opportunity to become more conscious of the burdens we constantly carry around with us. It's given us an opportunity to understand why we're carrying these burdens, why we suffer, not only how we're suffering, but why. So as you can see, this is going to be a very fun topic that we're going to be discussing about Saturn's retrograde in the sign of Aries, where Saturn's debilitated. But I think it's important to go through this because Saturn in Aries is debilitated, and it's a feeling of suffering in a lot of ways. And some of us are having our Saturn Sati period, which is if your moon is in the sign of Aries. So this is augmented, expounded. So it's worth going over this idea, this concept, to understand how to negotiate with Saturn in Aries. But before getting into the layers of this video, I do want to let you know that there's going to be another Saturn video, which is Saturn Trine the Sun now in the sign of Leo. At least we have something to work with, something harmonious, something that has a potential to elevate us. And there'll be plenty of other videos coming up for the month of August as well. It's a very busy month. If you want to catch those videos and more, please do remember to subscribe, press that notification bell so YouTube notifies you when those videos are out. And now onto our video. So I'm going to spend the first section talking a lot about Saturn, just the nature of Saturn so that we understand why Saturn signifies suffering, what it's for, what it's about. And then in the following sections, I'm going to go through two forms of suffering. One where we feel like we are the victim of circumstance, where suffering destroys us. And then another kind of suffering in life that is actually part and parcel with life. A kind of suffering that is teaching us what it means to elevate, to become more conscious. And in the last section, I want to talk about the trine that Saturn from the sign of Aries will be making into the sign of Leo with Jupiter there now, as well as Ketu coming into a conjunction with Jupiter. This is telling us something very profound, which is related to this video. So we'll be discussing all of that, but let's start with the symbols and significations of Saturn to understand the nature of Saturn in general. And I would say whenever Saturn gets activated in our chart, we find ourselves coming into contact with some facet of life that we just can't overcome it. We can't just put it aside. We can't turn a blind eye to it. Like, we might have a very clear vision of where we want to go in life, who we want to become, what it is that we want to do. And the minute that we have that vision, we start to notice that reality is constantly pushing back at us. It's as if it's saying, not yet, not this way. And when this happens, rest assured that you are grappling with this archetype of Saturn, externally or within yourself. And Saturn says not yet because Saturn represents limitation, delays. And Saturn represents time. Everything has to simmer. You can't just have something instantly. Saturn says to us, you know what? I am reality and I pre-exist you. I am karma and I say when it's time for fruition of something, not your commands and demands. I don't care how determined and motivated you are. You have to prove yourself. And we have to remember Saturn's significations is about being cold, distant. It's objective, so it's unemotional. In that sense, Saturn doesn't show us care with warm emotions. It doesn't care how much we're hurting. Saturn is impersonal. Reality is impersonal. Karma, cause and effect, is impersonal. It doesn't take into consideration our emotions or desires or wants. It's just a cold ledger of cause and effect. And you know, for us who are these beings who feel, who desire, we encounter Saturn as suffering, Saturn's ways. And Saturn is a planet of negation. It represents negativity. So Saturn's always in this mode of showing us the gap between what it is that we desire and who we actually are. This is why Saturn's so humbling. Like, we might be able to think big, desire big, but Saturn's always humbling us by telling us, you know what, you're not as big as those desires and those wishes and dreams right now. You're so far away from it. Work harder. In some ways, Saturn's like a dreadful parent, a parent that none of us want because they're always finding the fault with something. They use negative motivation. It's always telling us you're not good enough, not yet. We don't get that loving encouragement from Saturn. Saturn instills fear within us because of all of its no saying. Like, how many times can someone tell you no and you're still feeling determined and motivated and have self-belief and self-trust that you can do something? We experience these facets of Saturn as suffering, and we can meet it within our own personality of others, the way that we encounter the world. And if we are under the impression that life should unfold according to my desires and wishes because this is what I want, Saturn comes in brutally, often to disappoint us. And you know what? We've all experienced this. If you're past the age of 40, I am 100% certain you've gone through this. Because we all had this age, especially in our 20s, we're under the impression that this is my ideal life, this is my ideal self. By this age, I'm going to be in that career that I imagine. I'm going to have that relationship. I'm going to have this money. I'm going to have this house. All of my wounds will be healed. And not only will know our purpose, we'll be living it gloriously. But by age 37, which is also Saturn's maturation age, we come to encounter the brutality of reality. Saturn slowly starts showing us our limitations, the way that it will negate things, the way that it has and it will continue to. It starts to sink in. And then in the 40s, there comes a moment where you sit down and you're like, holy shit, I've been waiting, I've been busting my ass, and nothing has happened. Or not as well as I thought it was going to happen. Saturn forces all of us to start negotiating with these sub-ideal situations because it's not matching how we conceptualized life, how we wanted it to be. But the crazy thing is, despite that, despite all of life's uncertainty, we as human beings, we have to constantly move forward. We can't have that moment of defeat permanently just sit there and be like, oh my God, I didn't get my ideal life. I am not my ideal self. You can't just lay there and die. And my point right now here is no one is exempt from Saturn's hardship in this life. We all experience it in some way. Still till today, I have not met anyone who has lived past the age of 40 who said to me, Parisa, my life was so easy peasy, no problem. Everyone comes to have this experience at some point. And I would say almost all of us more than once, because we all meet our limitations. We're all bound to lose things and people. We're bound to experience scarcity of some sort, decay of certain things, decline of our health, and eventually death of other people and ourselves. These are all Saturn significations. And all of these things are painful. Saturn makes sure, Saturn as that last planet in the solar system, which has a viewpoint of every other planet, a wide scope, makes sure that no one escapes this reality. So Saturn's not prejudiced against any one person, nor does he favor anyone. We could say Saturn is about equality, and in some ways, Saturn dislikes everybody equally. He is the ultimate equalizer and humbler of life, of all living forms. A lion roars at its prime age. An older lion, you can see that it's suffering, so it's not just a human thing. The point is, every one of us will eventually reach a point where life gets extremely difficult. And that difficulty lasts because Saturn represents time. And that time period of it is experienced as a form of suffering. And Saturn's retrograde, because it's so close to Earth, because now we can see it with our naked eyes, it can see us. These themes of Saturn are about to become more pronounced until December. And as I'm making this video right now, Saturn's still very slow. It's just coming off of its station. And when Saturn gets this slow, it's asking us to slow down too. And I want you to remember, Saturn's naturally slow. So when it's stationed slow, it's super slow. This is a moment for us to pause and to look at our life for a second. Think about the way Saturn has been reality testing your life since Saturn moved into the sign of Aries on April 24th of 2025, and specifically since April 12th of 2026, which was when Saturn was at that 7-degree mark. Right now, Saturn wants us to become super aware of some of our old fears, familiar frustrations, unfinished responsibilities, and long-standing struggles that we've just been grappling with nonstop for a long time. And since Saturn takes 28 and a half years to come back to a sign, some of these struggles can be ongoing for that long. So Saturn is asking us to come back with me. I want you to be able to see certain things. And the way to see certain things with Saturn is to re-experience them. And we know what we're going to re-experience with Saturn is more difficulties and hardships. And going back to that question I was pondering, what is suffering? It brought me to the fact that Saturn is an ever-present function of existence. In that way, suffering is part and parcel with every facet and every phase of life. And if we say that suffering is part and parcel with life, then it's a superfluous question to ask, why do we suffer? We suffer because we're alive. But the deeper question is, what do we suffer for? And I think to ask, why am I suffering, is to take the stance of a victim. But what are we suffering for can actually start moving us towards self-mastery in a lot of ways. And I know this in my heart of hearts, even malefics like Saturn and Mars want mastery from us. They're not just cruel for sake of cruelty. It's not suffering just for suffering's sake. If we say existence itself is a form of consciousness, and we are a ray of that consciousness, we're trying to expand this consciousness. So it can't be suffering just for suffering's sake. It's about becoming more conscious. That's what self-mastery is. So now, for the next part of this video, I want to talk about the notion of suffering, but the kind of suffering that makes us feel like we're suffocating, suffering for suffering's sake, before I talk about suffering for a higher purpose in the following section. And I think one form of suffering that we experience in life, it enters our life very quietly in a lot of ways, a lot of times. It's not the kind of suffering that enters with a huge tragedy, nor with a single event that just changes the entirety of our life. It usually begins with some kind of a small interruption. And that belongs to what I was saying earlier. Suddenly, we have this moment while we're sitting on the couch. We hear a song and we're like, oh man, this is not how life was supposed to unfold. This is not where I'm supposed to be. And in that moment, when you think about it, the future becomes less certain. And when we let that feeling simmer for a bit, we actually stop asking ourselves, how can I get out of this? Where am I going? What can I do? The mind just refocuses, reshifts itself to what I don't have, what I am not, where I cannot go. It becomes Saturn, that principle of negation. It doesn't ask itself, what can I do? Every question is, why is something not something? And when you live in that mode, that instance of pain turns into months and years of suffering. And it's so difficult to diagnose this kind of a suffering because it's not just one obstacle. We just made the entirety of life into an obstacle. We're relating our sense of self to life as an obstacle. The self becomes an obstacle. So in some ways, it becomes us. We become that Saturn archetype. Like you see this in people who have been struggling for years in financial terms. They stop seeing themselves as someone who can have abundance in their life. They don't just have a financial hardship and the experience of it. So they are that. They become the epitome of it. They start seeing themselves as someone who can't have the comfort and material aspects of life. They see themselves as someone poor and impoverished. And I have even heard people say, I am cursed. Or to give you another example, people get into relationships. The first one doesn't go well. The second one doesn't go well. The person feels betrayed. And instead of seeing those as chapters of life, as opportunities to actually grow, because there are patterns as to why we get into these relationships, they submit to the betrayal. They submit to the not being with someone. And then in their head, there's just this quiet conclusion that I'm not lovable. People are not trustworthy. I'm not good enough. They start to see love itself as something that's related to pain and suffering. Love itself becomes drama for them. And I want you to take note of what's happening in these circumstances. The circumstance itself is becoming the person's identity. That's how they're identifying with life and with themselves. The problem with this is suffering is becoming identity. And because of it, suffering itself becomes hard to diagnose. It becomes difficult to recognize what is the self and what is the suffering. Because we have to know in life that I am merely experiencing something. I am not it, for better or for worse. If you have wealth, you are experiencing wealth. You are not the wealth. If you are sick, you are experiencing illness. You are not the illness. It's really important how we define things and label things. We cannot become things because things of the world drift away. And then what? We have to drift away with it all the time? That in itself is suffering again. And the crazy thing is, when something becomes our identity, it completely changes our decision-making process. To become something creates complacency. It makes us inert and subservient to that thing, which are all, again, Saturn symbols. We stop applying ourselves. We stop asking questions. We stop being curious about things. We don't want to learn anymore. We don't want to create. We stop stepping out into the world, taking a chance. These are all negative qualities of Saturn that's becoming part of one's identity. We have to be very aware of this. And when this happens, we can't imagine a different future. If we are suffering, future is suffering. We are going to be suffering in the future. And it's going to feel permanent because now it is our identity. Our identity, our sense of self has this long-lasting effect. It maintains itself through space and time. Like this is the person who sees themselves as being misfortunate. I always have bad luck. I am cursed. I will always be stuck. I will always be lonely. Again, all of these are Saturn's symbols in terms of the kind of effects Saturn denotes. When Saturn awakens in us like this, when it makes its home in our heart and body and mind, we become inertia. Saturn's inert, that slowness of it, that coldness of it. It is not about expansion and movement. It's about inertia. There's a gradual loss of movement in our life when this happens. And this is why I made a video in the past about why we should be so cautious of worshiping and revering Saturn. We have to understand which part of Saturn we have to grapple with in terms of getting self-mastery, becoming more conscious, becoming more elevated as a living being, and not to give into these facets of Saturn because it will be justifying suffering for suffering's sake and just remaining there and becoming it. And then everything that we touch in our life will turn into lead. So this is something that I want us to be cautious of when Saturn's moving back, when it's reintroducing old pains. not to identify with them that, yeah, this has always been my life, to become cynical, pessimistic, rather to see these experiences as experiences. But all of that said, and I've said this in many videos, a lot of times the remedy for a planet is the planet itself that's problematic. So the remedy for Saturn is often Saturn. That means mastery of Saturn comes through mastery of Saturn archetype, because Saturn is causing pain for us to see where we are deficient. That gap that exists between who we aspire to be and who we actually are. Like the work that's required to get there. This is what Saturn's showing us. And Saturn's pain is to get our attention. Nothing in this life gets our attention more than when we are in pain. Like this retrograde is going to take us to some painful places to show us, dude, you're not supposed to stay in this pain. It's showing us how we choose comfort and familiarity, even when it's hurting us. Saturn wants us to see our own human nature in terms of how remarkably we just adapt to situation, even situations that are life destroying, situations that don't reflect the life that we want to live, and even who we've become, how we become stunted in our growth. This pain is showing us how we learn from the emotional geography of our limitations. And we just roam around this limited land in a circle. And then sometimes we even just settle there. Like, this is my life. I'm just going to sit here and I'm not going to do anything else. Saturn's taking us, and we should have a wide scope right now as we go back to look at this landscape, the totality of it, not just where the pain is, not just where the limitation is. And by going back, we're getting to see the ways that we silence our own hope, the ways that we avoid our dreams, escape them, the ways that we hold ourselves back way more than what others do to us, and the way they try to hold us down and back. And I think the greatest lesson that Saturn's trying to teach us is that the things that used to feel like an emergency, that I had to overcome this, they're actually becoming ordinary, which is becoming that suffering identity. So Saturn's asking us with this retrograde, is suffering, the things that cause you pain in this life, are they a mere experience that you can grapple with and try to understand them? Or are they becoming your identity? Because we're reviewing some of the same things. And the way to know the difference is that we're going to feel those pains, and the instinct is that I need to change this. Or do you find yourself actually defending your suffering, defending your loneliness, defending all the hardships that you're going through? If you're defending it, is becoming part of your identity, something to be aware of this time around. If suffering is becoming how we are defining ourselves, have no doubt that it's starting to affect your decision making, and you're unconsciously protecting that identity. This is a time to see it. Like, if you're expecting disappointments before life has even disappointed you, it's become a part of your identity. If you assume failure before you've even started, it has become part of your identity. Saturn's going to show us, if it's become part of your identity, you are going to stay here because you have already decided who you are. And I was saying in the last video, I was having a discussion about this notion of agency and free will. These are the small types of free will and agency we have in this life, which makes all the difference in this life. In some ways, Saturn is taking us back to some old places that are unpleasant for us to see if we're going to let the past define us, or if we still have the forbearance to struggle and suffer a little bit more so that we can get out of it eventually and get on to the next set of suffering. Because like I was saying, it doesn't seem to end. On the other hand, Saturn wants to test if that suffering has become our identity, because we're not carrying that suffering anymore. We actually protect it. And now I want to talk about that other entirely different kind of suffering. The one that is not about remaining where we are. The one that has more to do with self-mastery and mastery of the Saturn archetype within us, which has a lot to do with the kind of sufferings we choose in this life. Again, when we have that Saturn archetype matured within us, we stop asking, why is this thing happening to me? Why am I experiencing this? Why me? With maturity, we actually start to ask another kind of question, which is very difficult. And it's about, what am I willing to give my life to? I am willing to live for this, love this, and to die for this. In fact, anyone who has ever lived a meaningful life, they have confronted this question. Like, some people will devote their entire life into knowledge and creation of things. Others devote themselves to raising a family. Some people are about building their business and their profession. The forms of them are different, but the movement of it is the same. And that means at some point we have to put something at the center of our life as something like a godhead almost, and we start orbiting it. That immature question is that I want to be the center and I want the world to revolve around me. Reality doesn't work like this. You put something at the center and you start bowing to it. You start serving it. This is what Saturn's mastery is about. Because when you put yourself at the center and you want everything to orbit around you, that means you're asking the entirety of existence to sacrifice itself for you, to be at pain and discomfort for you. But that's not how life works. We put something in the center and we start to sacrifice. We go through the pain and the suffering to love that thing and to be devoted to it. And if you think about it, there's a huge difference between the type of suffering I was describing before and the type that I'm describing now. The other one is coming through interruption of life. This one is coming through because of participation in life. And the crazy thing is, in this case, we sacrifice many things, we lose many things, but we can see the exchange value for that loss. Like we'll exchange our time, energy, life force, resources, our comfort, certainty, money. We'll even lose sleep because these losses are giving our life a sense of meaning and purpose. We are suffering for meaning and purpose. Pain and suffering in itself becomes something valuable. It has a value. And what I'm trying to say here is that in this life, as I was explaining earlier too, no matter how we flip this coin, suffering never disappears from our life. But we can't come to have a mature relationship with suffering. And we have to cultivate a greater sense of maturity with suffering because this is the nature of life in so many ways. People think as the years go by, life should get easier. My friends, rest assured, as the years of life go by, life gets more difficult. When you speak to someone who's 90 years old, the act of putting your feet down from your bed to stand up, it hurts. There is suffering even in just being, the things that we take for granted. Things that used to take us 10 minutes to do as we get older, now we have to invest 30 minutes of energy, 1 hour of energy to do it. Things become more difficult. So suffering is always there. But the difference is to understand why we're suffering and when possible to choose our suffering. And when we choose our suffering, it doesn't mean that there's less of it. Like a person who chooses to have a child, they have just signed up to suffer in a lot of ways for many years to come. But what changes is the meaning that we're inserting into the suffering, which makes all the difference. And this is the deepest lesson that we can learn from Saturn. It was never the question of whether if I can suffer or not suffer. Saturn, from day one of life, is keep telling us, yes, you will suffer. This is the nature of grappling and living in reality. The question is whether our suffering has a purpose that goes beyond just suffering. Whether if the suffering is shaping us towards something that's becoming greater than what it was. And you can see the prime example of this. I love using athletes. It comes to my mind naturally, like always it comes first. But athletes do this, right? The way that they push their bodies. You do not want to be in an athlete's body. As good as it looks, you do not want to live there because they are in constant, perpetual mode of fatigue and pain. They push their body past their limit during training, the amount of pain that they have to bear and overcome. And afterwards, for that recovery process, there's so much pain involved there. It's just never ending, but that suffering is making them stronger. That suffering is what makes them stand to the last moment and outlast their opponent. That is defining their greatness. How much suffering they can bear is correlated to how great that they can be in their career. This is the Saturn archetype coming at play. And Mars also represents pain. Both Saturn and Mars represent pain. But Mars's pain is severe, excruciating, but it doesn't last. So you get into a car accident, all your bones are broken, the adrenaline fade away, and then the pain just like a monster, a beast hits you. That's Mars. Saturn is now the recovery. How am I going to heal these bones? I have to relearn how to walk. I have to relearn how to use every single fingertip. The endurance and the suffering that's coming from Saturn. So these two malefics are about this life, but there's a way to master all of these. And I want us to realize something else. Aries is involved in this conversation. because Saturn's in the sign of Aries. And Aries is a very powerful sign, but not enough to be able to remove our burdens of Saturn, the way it's slowing us down and all of that. But the sign of Aries has the potential to give our burdens a sense of direction. It's a cardinal sign. It wants to choose a direction. It's a dharmic sign. It wants to move based on its purpose, to express what it's made of. So in the sign of Aries, we're also being asked to decide decisively and consciously. It's a fire sign. It's about seeing and knowing. It's asking us understand what's worthy of your time and efforts. You want to be efficient in the sign of Aries. And when we are in the seat where we can choose things and where we can decide, life doesn't just happen to us. We don't become these innocent bystanders. We become a participant. And with Saturn here, we make ourselves decisively and consciously at service of something. And we choose its suffering, and its suffering becomes something purposeful. So with this retrograde, we should actually kick back for a minute and ask ourselves a few questions. Like, how did this weight end up on my shoulder? Did I put it here or did someone else put it here? What is it for? Was it life that placed it here? Was it my own values? Was it my fear, my guilt? Was it someone else's expectations? Or was this my choice? This is a choice that I made, and these are the burdens that are coming with it. And this is why I'm suffering. And understanding these questions starts to change our relationship with how we suffer, what we suffer for. And just that relationship with suffering starts to change. Because I'm telling you, suffering that corresponds to our deepest values feels very different than suffering that comes from bullshit obligation, self-limiting beliefs, the way that suffering becomes our identity, suffering that comes through habit or ignorance. Suffering of choice actually has a sense of nobility in it because you're suffering for the greater good, because you're suffering to make something of your life better, the life of someone you love better. And this is the wisdom of this retrograde that Saturn's trying to bring forth. And of course, it's going to involve more pain, more endurance, more suffering. But it's about an opportunity to get mastery over what it is we're doing, why we're struggling, how we're struggling, what the struggle's for. But as I mentioned earlier, that's not the end of the story here. Because now the Saturn in Aries is encountering Jupiter in the sign of Leo, and Ketu by sign now has this aspect because Ketu South Node is in the sign of Leo, and it's a trine aspect. And I would say that this is one of the most profound conversations of 2026 and 2027 between the sign of Aries and the sign of Leo. Because on one hand, Saturn's teaching us resiliency and endurance, like fail, retry. And Jupiter is always teaching us something about wisdom. It's making us wiser. And Ketu is teaching us how to detach ourselves from certain things because they need to be integrated or they have been integrated. And I talk about Ketu's integration extensively in the previous video about Aquarius, Rahu, and Ketu Leo nodal shifts. But when we take the conversation between Saturn, Jupiter, and Ketu, as well as Aries and Leo, as a trine, we're invited to a very different kind of question than the one that I just discussed about Saturn by itself. So that question of Saturn, which is about suffering, turns into, is this worthy of my life, the struggle that I'm in? Because, there are moments in life where we have to continue our struggle. That is the only way to get out of it. That's the only way to get to a destination. That's the only way to resolve something. And what's on the other end is actually better than what was and what is. So it's a worthy struggle. Like take marriage, for example. At its heart, this dynamic is meant to grow us. So when things get tough, you don't just bounce. Again, unless if it's a toxic, crazy relationship, bounce, take a hike and never come back. But I'm just saying, if there are just dynamics, struggles, phases where everyone's suffering, but if it's contributing to the growth, we stay. Or take the dream of a creative, a writer. It requires decades, years of effort. And all of this comes with tremendous amount of pain, suffering, a lot of burdens. But when you pay attention over the years, they're shaping us, growing us to someone who's more whole, who's more conscious, and by definition, better. So the pain and the suffering comes to be a definition of our strength because they're adding to the meaning of our life. But there are these other struggles that only consume life. And these are usually the battles that we didn't choose ourselves, the battles that we're fighting for other people, battles that we inherit, relationships that are built entirely around conflict, taking on responsibilities that in actuality is someone else's responsibility, expectations that we accept because we want other people's approval. Jupiter entering here is going to give us a greater power of discernment. It's wisdom to look at these facets of our lives, to understand why we're grappling with certain things, why we keep trying to do certain things. Like Saturn in the sign of Aries can indicate failure, but this relentless drive to retry again. But sometimes we don't need to retry certain things. Jupiter right now is giving us the wisdom to see that. Jupiter is going to be asking us, does this burden deserve another year of your life? Are you willing to sacrifice another year of your life for it? Does this responsibility really belong to you? Is it making you better? Is it making the other person better, the responsibility you took from them? And with Aries and Leo, both of them fire sign of the masculine principle, they represent courage and bravery. So these two signs by aspect as a trine, they're going to show us that sometimes the bravest thing to do, the most courageous thing to do is to stay, remain responsible, continue grappling with it, endure. But sometimes the bravest thing to do is to quietly just put something down and just walk away, never look back, give your silence from that point forth. Take the loss and the pain that might even come from that, but it's the right thing to do. I would say that this year, there's a profound lesson in it. We're supposed to learn, in general, the difference between giving up and becoming free. Because one of them comes from fear, from being a coward, and the other one comes from courage and wisdom. And having Ketu here, Ketu has this remarkable way of showing us where our attachments have outlived their purpose. It will remove all the illusions of where we think we need to stay and keep pushing. This is my dream. It might not be anymore. Ketu is going to be showing us this, that you're not suffering because you're trying to attain a dream. You're suffering because that dream died long ago, but that dream has also become part of your identity and you just can't differentiate the two anymore. Ketu's helpful right now in that sense. Like this year, some aspect of it is about the endurance and the forbearance to stay and to keep trying. And another part of it is just about, what was that Tupac song, or the Tupac interview where he said, sometimes when things don't work, I'm paraphrasing, you just let it go, let it fall into the ground, fuck it, and you walk away. Sometimes we have to do that. So with some things, we're going to say, I'm going to keep pushing through. And with some other things, just this ends here right now. And going back just to Saturn, we have to realize that our life is finite. This is one of the greatest realizations we can have. The earlier we can have it, the more things we can understand about how we should show up in the world. And to say our life is finite is to say our time is finite, as is our energy, resources, the amount of strength that we have, even the amount of forbearance that we have, which Saturn's constantly asking for it. And Saturn's reminding us every day, wherever you spend your energy and time, carrying one set of burden, just notice you will not have enough in you to carry another. This is why it's so important to know which burdens are worthy of being carried and which ones it is that we should be putting down. In some ways, we have to pick our lane in this life. Which suffering do you choose? Why are you choosing it? So the question is not whether we carry something or not in this life. The question is about what we carry, and what we carry should reflect the life that we are meant to live, the life that we are made to live. And that trine from Aries to Leo, both a fire sign, both having to do with Dharma, has a lot to do with our purpose of why we're here, why we are made the way that we are. And the way that we are made is denoting that purpose. And this is bringing us close to the end of the video. And before closing, I would like to ask you, please do like, share, and subscribe. And please do comment, especially since May 24th, 2025. How do you feel like you've been suffering in this life? What kinds of suffering has come to shape your life, your perception, how you see things, how you feel things? And I think most importantly, think about if this suffering is becoming part of your identity. Is it changing your gaze, the way you evaluate things, the way that you see the future, the way that you define your past and what you have experienced? It's very important to understand this. We want to master the Saturn archetype within us. But I promise you, you do not want the negativity of Saturn to become the master of you. You will be the slave. And being a slave to Saturn, not so bad, but being a slave to this world, not good. And I think another worthwhile question is to think about what you are willing to suffer for. That meaningful kind of suffering, that you are suffering for something that's going to bring greater consciousness and greater good into your life and into the world. That kind of suffering is worth it in this life. And of course, if you want a reading of this transit, the upcoming transits, or if you want to understand your birth chart, your natal chart, you can go to the email in the description box of this video or any video if you want to book your reading. And if you need more information, you can go to parisayazdi.com on my website. My email is also there when you decide that you want to book your reading. And now to close. And I want to say this, life wants something from all of us. In fact, what life wants from us is our life, the very thing that it's given us, plus interest. For this reason, energy, expenditure of effort, pain, and suffering are going to be part and parcel with life, with what it means to live. And not to mention getting through life. If you reflect back, it's been about overcoming one obstacle after another and another. And I think in our modern world, we have kind of forgotten this. We take it for granted that so much of our pain and our suffering has been automated and we don't have to think about it anymore. And we've gotten to a point where it's leisurely enough for many people to sit there to imagine a future and to expect it to just poof, appear before them without any kind of a struggle. But if you go back to just 100 years ago, 200 years ago, people had to hunt for their food. They had to struggle for their shelter. There was obstacle after obstacle for mere survival on a daily basis. This is the true nature of life. And if you do have a vision of your life, for your life, the vision is the most beautiful part when it's happening in your mind. If you are blessed to arrive to that vision in the world, almost all of it is about struggle, pain, suffering, trying, and overcoming obstacles. Like that athlete, again, going back to the athlete, they hold up their gold medal at the Olympics one moment in time, while there's a lifetime of pain, trying, failure, trying again behind it. So pain and suffering are part of the human condition. It's part of being conscious, grappling with reality, being alive. But I want us to also know within that reality, there's extraordinary amount of freedom because we have the capacity to become conscious of what we are giving our life to. Like life's going to take life no matter what. But we do have that choice to say, I have dedicated my life to this. And dear life, for that part of you, take it. It's yours. We do have a choice in the way that we suffer. Do we suffer in a way that closes our life? Or are we suffering for something that is trying to open life up? Are we suffering for our selfish needs and greedy stuff? Or are we suffering for the greater good? These are the choices that we have. This is where we're free. And you know, Saturn in the sign of Aries, again, in that dharmic sign, and a sign that is about freedom, is about courage, is trying to help us understand this purpose of our life, this dharma of our life. What are we suffering for? Are you suffering because you're serving the purpose of your life? Or are you just suffering in vain because you want some aspect of the world? You just want your life to look like something. So we're getting the courage to understand this long-term purpose of our life. And even when we do, I want us to understand, again, we're going to suffer, but it's purposeful. And when we understand the purpose of our life, meaning always follows. And meaning is the medicine for suffering, is the painkiller for suffering. And I want us to realize as Saturn's retracing its steps back, old fears are going to come up. We're going back to some unfinished chapter of our life to understand something. And I urge you, or I encourage you, not to ask the question of why is this happening to me again? I encourage you to instead ask, what is the worth of this hardship? And what exactly is it asking of me? If I grapple with it, is it contributing to me becoming something better? Life around me becoming something better? Does this thing deserve my time? Does it deserve my energy and my commitment? I think this is a time for us to realize that our lives are shaped by what we give ourselves to, not just what we take from the world. And if we say suffering is part of being human, then one of the greatest acts of wisdom is to understand what we're suffering for and how to suffer, which means suffering because we are living for our purpose and with purpose. And this brings us to the end of our video, and I'd like to leave us with a wish. And my wish for us during this retrograde is that we come to see suffering with greater clarity, not as something to escape, but as something to understand. And I say, may you recognize the burdens that no longer belong to you. Have the wisdom to lay them down and the courage to take up the ones that give your life meaning. And may your struggles deepen your character instead of diminish your spirit. And may every sacrifice you choose bring you closer to the life you know in your heart that you're meant to live. And that's it for today. Sending you much love. Till next time.